So welcome to this Dharma talk from the SVT. And before we start, we'll just start with a Namo Tassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Sambuddhassa. And today we're going to be looking at an extract from the Sutta Nipata. And there was a slight error in the publicity. It's actually chapter 3, and it's Sutta 12, verses 1 to 10, not Sutta 2. And this is a very interesting sutta because it takes us through an exploration of what the practice is and different manifestations of the practice. So let me start by reading directly and pick up any comments as we go through. Now, by all means, signal if you would like to make a comment, or we can have a discussion as well at the end. So this is called Origination and Cessation. Thus have I heard. Once the Buddha was staying in the eastern park of Megara Matu's estate at Savatthi. One evening on a full moon day, he was sitting in the open air with all the monks gathered around him. He saw that they were silent, and so he spoke to them. Monks, he said, it sometimes happens in this world that things are said concerning skillful states, distinguished and liberating statements are made that lead to full enlightenment. Now, monks, why should you bother to listen to those statements? People may ask you this same question, and if they do, you should answer them like this. It is for the purpose of knowing two things as they have come to be. They may ask you what these two ideas are, and if they do, you should answer them like this. The first insight is this. This is suffering, or dukkha. This is what causes it. The second insight is this. That is where dukkha stops, and that is how you get there. Now, the translation of dukkha as suffering is always slightly problematic because there are so many undertones and overtones around the word suffering. But it's interesting to look at some of the etymology behind the word dukkha. And one description of that is that we think of it like the wooden axle of a bullock cart. Now, when the bullock cart is new, the axle fits the wooden hole in the wheel very well, and the ride is smooth. But as the bullock cart ages with wear, the hole in the wheel begins to deform, and so does the wooden axle. The consequence of that is that and with every revolution of the wheel, there's an irregular movement. And so one description of dukkha is the fact that there's this presence of this sort of irregular movement. And that can occur whether the road is smooth and straight and flat, or whether the road has potholes or whatever. So the word dukkha in that context is about this irregularity of this movement. So that in our lives, irrespective of the circumstances we might be in, potholes, flat, smooth road, we can still have this irregularity or this interruption or this irritation or awkwardness in whatever we're doing. It's possible. It's not saying that everything is dukkha, but everything has the potential to have dukkha in it. So that, I think, is quite a helpful way of looking at this, rather than this universal word of suffering, which then conjures up an image of a particular aspect that we might associate with suffering. Dukkha is an inherent quality that can exist in almost any circumstances. And so what are we going to do about it? There are these twofold insights. Grasp them together, and in the course of a life of energy, dedication, and care, you can expect one of two results. There will either be the fruit of perfect knowledge, or if any essential components are not exhausted yet, there will be at least no further births. So this is describing the state of anagami or arahantship. But what's really interesting here is its description. In the course of a life of energy, dedication, and care. So the energy is that we need to apply effort. We need to apply ourselves to what it is that we're observing. The dedication is really the fact that when we do this application, when we apply ourselves in this way, we have to be prepared to do it time and time and time again. We need to be dedicated to the repetition of the practice in order to learn the lessons that we need. And then the care, well, the way I like to think of care here is that we need to do this with a sense of heartfelt attitude. We need a sense of love towards ourselves, a love towards the process, and to everyone else that's involved or part of this. So dedication, energy, and care are important components of the practice. When the Buddha had said this to the monks, he went on as teacher to explain. There are people who do not understand dukkha. They do not know where it comes from, where it totally ends, or how to get where it ends. So here, there's this sense, if you like, that dukkha is something external. It's something that's done to me. So when we take a perspective that dukkha is something that's done to me, then there's no inquiry about where it could come from me. And so it seems circumstantial. It seems that we are, if you like, a victim to the presence of dukkha under certain contexts. And this sense of being helpless is the opposite of what the Buddha is describing as part of the teaching. But if we have that perspective, then we don't make any inquiry. We simply seek to address dukkha by distracting ourselves with something that's more pleasant. And the Buddha described this as two aspects or two types of response to dukkha. Once something is occurring which is not as to which we would like, one response is to turn away and seek pleasure, and the other response is to be curious about how does dukkha arise? What's its nature? And the Buddha said that for those who choose to distract, there is no inquiry. They seek to find a path which minimizes the presence of dukkha in their lives. And it's not to be in judgment about that. But then those who see the pattern of dukkha arising and have a different perspective, which is to say, well, what is the cause of this? Those are the people then who then explore, inquire, are curious, begin to investigate. And what do they investigate on? They investigate through the nature of experience. So, without a chance to emancipate the mind or achieve emancipation through knowledge, they cannot affect an ending. They can only go on and on, being born and getting old. So those are those who don't choose to investigate. There are also people who comprehend suffering. So they experience it, they see it, but they're seeing it with eyes which are not avoidant, if you like, who know how it happens, where it totally ends, and how to get to where it ends. So there we're describing the Four Noble Truths. The presence of dukkha, its cause, how it comes about, how it ceases, and how to understand that, the path that we need to follow, the Eightfold Path. They have got the emancipation of mind and the emancipation through knowledge. Now they can effect an ending. No more going on and on, being born and getting old. This is the proper twofold insight. But you may be asked to describe it in another way. And that you could do like this. One insight is that grasping is the base of all dukkha. Now, grasping here isn't the stage of the Paticca Samuppada, dependent origination, which goes from contact to feeling to craving to clinging. The clinging there is upadana. But the grasping that they're describing here comes from the root word upadi. And upadi references all of the khandhas. So those are the body, feeling, perception, the sankharas, the willed actions, if you like, and the consciousness of these. So those are the four components that the mind tends to cling to. But it also includes other things. It includes all sensory experience, or karma, C-A-M-A, karma. And so that's about, if you like, our sensuous desire. And sensuous desire isn't just around sexuality. Sensuous desire is saying any attachment to an aspect of our senses. And so remember our six senses, the five classical outward senses of the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, and the tactile sense of the body, and the internal sense of the mind. These are our gateways to the outside world. And so if we have an attachment or aversion to any experience at any of those gateways, then this is sensuous desire. So if we seek out and hold on to, this is an attachment. If we experience something and we want to push it away, this is an aversion. And so desire and aversion are kind of like two sides of the same coin. They're showing a degree of attachment, either wanting to hold on to or fearing that it's going to stay. Both of these are aspects of attachment. So this is also part of upadi. And then all of the mental departments, all the kilesas, the greed, the hate, the delusion, and all of these are also aspects of upadi. And they are also aspects of this grasping nature of mind. Sometimes this word is described as acquisition. It's the acquiring mind. And with this acquiring mind, we hold on to experience, either it's a negative or not. Okay, and the whole process of doing that is the engine that generates a karmic consequence. Remember, karma here, the word karma means action. So when we have these acquisitions, it leads to action. And when that action comes from a place of attachment or aversion, then it has a karmic reflex to it, which inhabits the next moment and subsequent moments. So one insight is that grasping is the basis of all dukkha. The other insight is that by the complete cooling and cessation of all this grasping, there is no more arising of suffering. Now, when that's complete, an absolute. We're talking about the state of mind of an arahant. But we can experience the temporary cessation of this. And that occurs each time we apply the 6 R's to experience, where we've noticed this grasping, this acquisition. Because it's this grasping that takes us away from our meditation object. Okay, so this acquisitional mind. And the acquisitional mind is really an innate part of the way our mind operates. So many of us will be familiar with this phrase, the monkey mind. And we can tend to think of the monkey mind as its tendency to flip from one thing to another and sort of be on this persistently restless quest for activity and entertainment, if you like. But the original meaning of the monkey mind, as in the suttas, was subtly different to this. What it was describing was an innate quality of the mind. And what it was describing was the way the mind goes out to reach for the next thing. So there's the action of the monkey going from one branch to another. It's reaching for the next branch. And it's an innate quality of the mind to do this. And so this is something that we need to recognize within ourselves in our own practice. And this is why the Buddha describes of working with these senses, the 5 outward and the 1 inward sense, as guarding the senses. Not guarding in the sense of prohibiting something, but being aware of the tendency for the mind to go out and hold on to this, acquiring this grasping, and bringing a clear-sightedness to that, so that we are selective about how that aspect of the mind operates. It's an innate quality. So what is it how are we going to lean our mind? So there's this other wonderful phrase that the Buddha had, which is, what one thinks and ponders upon becomes the inclination of our mind. So we can think of this reaching out as the inclination of the mind. So we have some control about how we direct that activity, not in the idea of stopping the activity itself. It's an innate quality of the mind. So when we allow ourselves to have increasing clear-sightedness, then we begin to see what the mind is thinking and pondering upon. And when we use the 6 R's, we're releasing away from something that is being grasped in an unwholesome way. And remember, unwholesome doesn't in this context mean good and bad. It's not black and white like that. We can grasp onto something which has some good quality to it, but our relationship to it is one of grasping rather than allowing it to be. So it's the when we're 6Ring, and Bhante Vinaramsi would describe this as an unwholesome state of mind. The unwholesomeness of it isn't about the quality of the thing itself, but in the way that we've taken it personally. And so the grasping has happened. So the 6 R's are about recognizing the grasping, releasing away from it. So, what are these aspects of our experience that we're holding on to release the tension inside our head around our brain, which is then to let go of the clinging, which generated the personal identity with this experience. To re-smile, which is bringing the care back in, bringing the smile back in, and then coming back to the object of attention. Now, in our formal practice, that might be the feeling of loving kindness, but in daily activity, it might be whatever task that we were doing at the time. So the 6 R's are all about recognizing this aspect of grasping. So as we work with the 6 R's, we temporarily have a complete cooling and cessation of grasping. It may only be for a moment, but each moment our physical brain and our mind understand that there's something different has happened. And as we begin to build that reflex, then the thinking and pondering of our mind changes its inclination. There are these 2 insights, grasp them together, and here the grasp is different to the acquisition. It just means, to take these together, and with energy, dedication, and care, you can expect one of those 2 results. So either complete understanding and knowledge of the Arahant, or being an Anagami. Now, there are many kinds of dukkha in this world, and all of them grow from the same source, this grasping. When you know, when a man knows no better, he gives way to this grasping, and slowed and dulled, he goes through one misery after another. So do not create it for yourselves. Use your knowledge to see how dukkha begins and develops in this attachment. So this is the grasping, the acquisition, the attachment of the mind. There is another way of describing this twofold insight. One insight is that ignorance is the basis of all suffering. The other is that by the complete cooling and cessation of ignorance, no more suffering is produced. These are the 2 insights. Grasp them together, and with energy, dedication, and care, you can expect one of those 2 results. So, ignorance. What is it that we are ignorant of? Well, classically, ignorance is usually defined in terms of 3 aspects. The first of these are the triplet of recognizing impermanence, the presence of dukkha, and understanding anatta, or non-person, things being non-personal. And the anicca, the impermanence, is seeing that things arise when the conditions are there for them to arise. They persist whilst those conditions are conducive, and when the conditions change, these things disappear. And the dukkha is to recognize that unless we accept the nature of anicca, we will experience dukkha. In terms of pleasant things, we worry that the pleasant will disappear, that we can't hold on to it, it won't persist. In terms of unpleasant things, then we worry that they're going to persist and not go. And so we fail to recognize the nature of anicca in both those cases. The anatta is a more subtle awareness. This is recognizing that these things are not under our personal control. What we feel, even what we think, what we see, and all the rest of it is only possible when the conditions are right for it to be there. When the conditions change, these things all change. Everything in our experience is not under our personal control. And so anatta is a recognition of this. And it tends to feel like it's a complicated thing to understand. But actually, the way Bhante Ramsay used to describe it makes it very straightforward. And we need to understand what utter meant at the time of the Buddha. And utter was a epithet, if you like, a name for our unchanging essence. We might call it a soul or a self or some other aspect. And it's our real self, our true self. Now, our true self would have certain characteristics. First thing is it would be permanent because it's our true self. The second thing is that there would be nothing within the experience of the true self that would harm us. Okay? Because it's our true self, it would only have our own good and benefit as its aspect. So it's permanent, it's non-harming, it has aspects of things which are entirely conducive to our welfare. And the Buddha said, well, look, that's a reasonable description of a self. And then he said, well, I don't say there isn't a self, and I don't say there is. All I ask you to do is look at all of your experience through the six senses and tell me what in that experience has those properties. And of course, we look at everything in our senses and we see that they're impermanent, so they're not permanent, they're not unchanging. And that at different times, the same thing can be experienced as sukha, pleasant, or dukkha, unpleasant. It entirely depends on the context. For many of us, we can eat some really rich chocolate and be delighted by it. If we had a whole bucket of the chocolate to eat, sooner or later, we would get very tired of that taste. So the pleasantness and the unpleasantness isn't an attribute of the thing itself, but our relationship to it. And the relationship we have to it is entirely contextual. And when the context changes, our experience of it changes. We saw a film when we were younger and we thought it was the best thing that we'd ever seen. We look at it again, perhaps 10 years later, and we begin to wonder what we saw so much in it. The context is different. A favorite book or whatever, or food that we really enjoyed when we were young. So ignorance, anicca, dukkha, anatta. But also there's ignorance of the cause of dukkha, that it arises, that it can cease, and that there's a path to it. So that's the second aspect of ignorance. And the third aspect is seeing the conditionality of our experience. Seeing that when we have senses, we have contact. So if we have a functioning eye and an object to see, eye consciousness arises. With the meeting of those three together, contact happens. We can think of that as perhaps a synaptic event in the brain. With contact comes feeling. And Bhante Vimamsi would describe feeling as the I like it, I don't like it mind. And with feeling comes clinging, the story about why we like it or don't like it. And with that story comes papancha, the proliferation around that story. And with that comes the birth of action and all the other things. So when we begin to see these chain of events running through, we begin to understand that when we don't actually control the process, it's an impersonal process. What we can control is our relationship to each of those steps. And that's what the Buddha described. He saw the weak link as between that feeling, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, and the craving, the I like it, I don't like it mind. And he said, if you understand that link, you can free yourself from dukkha. And so ignorance here, the three marks, the Four Noble Truths, and dependent origination. constant traveling from birth to birth, from this form to that form again and again. This is what results from ignorance. It is due to this ignorance that people's minds become dulled and muddled, that they go on endlessly wandering from life to life. But if you walk towards knowledge, so this is turning your mind towards investigation. You leave these rebirths behind. You do not go on becoming. So I love this term, walk towards knowledge. It's not a run, it's not a dash, it's a walk. Because it's as much as we can do to turn our mind and to begin to investigate, to turn towards dukkha rather than to turn away from it and distract ourselves. So this turn towards knowledge is the practice of meditation. And Bhante Vimaransa used to describe meditation very simply. He said, it is choosing to observe how mind's attention moves from one mind state to another. And so, in that very simple description, is embraced all of the aspects of ignorance. Because if we see how one mind state moves to another, we see the impermanence of mind states. We see that whatever came up as a consequence of that mind state changes. So if it was pleasant, we regret the passing of it. If it was unpleasant, we feel relieved of it at its passing. So we see the aspect of dukkha. And because it's constantly changing, we see that it's anatta. It doesn't have the quality of a permanent self. By doing that, we see how dukkha arises and how it ceases. So here's the Four Noble Truths coming through. And because we're seeing this as a process, then we're seeing dependent origination. There is another way of describing this twofold insight. One insight is that impulses are the basis of all forms of suffering. The other is that by the complete cooling and cessation of impulses, no more suffering is produced. There are these are the two insights. Grasp them together, and with energy, dedication, and care, you can expect one of those two results, anagami or arahantship. Every form of suffering or dukkha grows out of mental impulse. Eradicate the impulses and no more suffering is produced. So here we have the sankharas, the willed activities, the impulses of the mind. And if we can begin to observe these impulses, to see how the mind leans into different things, how with the experience of the senses coming in, how we respond rather than react, then we begin to see the choices we have around which impulse we follow. So we initially start with awareness, just to begin to see the processes of the mind. And then with that awareness, we begin to coach ourselves about, so this has happened, I need to come back and do something different. We begin to train ourselves. But as we become more and more familiar with the meditation, then we kind of take up this position of leadership, self-leadership. We are making the choices as these things occur. We're not recovering and understanding. We're now seeing things as they begin to unfold. So understanding our mental impulses is a vital step in this process. Every form of suffering grows out of mental impulse. Eradicate the impulses and no more suffering is produced. Consider this harmful consequence of impulses, that they are the basis of suffering. By the complete calming of the impulses and the stopping of the train of perceptions, suffering disappears. So there's this lovely image of the train of perceptions. As the impulse comes, a whole series of experiences are perceived. And what we notice is that if we cut off the impulses, that whole train of consequential perceptions drops away. And that's the teaching that the Buddha described, to see this dependency and to see how to release away from this. So wise men understand this in accordance with fact. With right knowledge, the wise ones overcome the yoke of Mara. There is no more rebirth for them. So Mara, if you like, is a personification of the way the mind becomes accessible to unwholesome impulses when there's a lack of clear seeing. But when we begin to develop the clear seeing, the space and the opportunity for Mara to come in is much reduced. Not because those seeds of distraction, if you like, aren't always present, but that we've learned how to come back into balance when they occur. And so our mind increasingly finds a position and space of balance in our practice. So we can think of the 6 R's as each time we do the 6 R's, Mara has got through the defenses, if you like. The senses of the guarding of the senses has been incomplete. Now, again, the guarding of the senses are not about prohibition. The Buddha once described the 6 senses like the 6 gates in a walled city. And the guards are at each gate. Now, the purpose of the guards is not to bar people from coming in and out. A city needs commerce. It needs people constantly coming in and coming out, new people coming in, goods going board and being taken out, and all the rest of it. So the purpose of the guards is simply to look for things which look harmful or unusual, out of the ordinary, and to check what they are. And that's what the Buddha means by guarding the senses. Yeah, just be watching what's going on. Be curious, be attentive, but not prohibitive. So that the flow of the city life can continue unabated. And so the flow of our own lives can continue unabated. It's not a life of restriction and denial. It's a life of expansion and balance. So, to allow what we've covered just to sink in for a moment, let's just do a short sit. Sit comfortably. Softly rotate your inner thighs, drop the inner edge of your shoulder blades, and let your spine come into balance. The time when you felt joyful, happy, open, expansive. And the most simple of the memories are the most useful. Gently smile. And allow that feeling to be present in you. Now stay with that feeling of joyfulness, however it's present. It may be a strong feeling in your body, it may be a simple smile. Let the thought gently fade away. Allow the feeling of well-being to be in you. And this is part of the care that we take in our practice, coming back to this restorative, wholesome state of loving kindness. Describe loving kindness as a blameless state, one that causes no harm to ourselves, to others, or to both. Say to yourself, may I be well, may I be joyful, and may I be happy. Your mind gets distracted, recognize that's happened, release away from the distraction. Simply pay no attention. Relax the holding and bracing around your brain, created by the attachment to the distraction. Softly smile. Back to the feeling of loving kindness. And so this is a process of returning to balance, which is a state of self-love, self-regard. Say to yourself, may I be well, may I be joyful, may I be happy, may my mind be peaceful and calm, and my heart open and safe. Today, let's expand that to all those we share this practice with. May they be well. May they be joyful and happy, and may their minds be peaceful and calm, and their hearts open and accepting. And let's expand it again to all sentient beings. May they be well, may they be joyful, may they be happy, and may their minds be peaceful, calm, and their hearts open and accepting. Feel the sense of contact with the ground. Come to your breath. Take a deliberate breath in and out, and then softly and gently open your eyes. So, any thoughts around the nature of these acquisitions, these impulses, this ignorance, that are all ways that we can work and develop our practice? Shriya, anything you'd like to add?
No, it was just nice to see you after Vipassana retreats. I was really happy.
Good. Excellent. Very nice to see you too. And Viku, any reflections on what we've been talking about?
No, thank you.
Hello, Paul. How are you doing?
Okay. Thanks for the talk. I've got nothing to add.
Okay. What's your takeaway from the talk? Anything in particular?
To be honest, I want to listen to it again. It was very deep.
Well, one of the things that we can, as we were talking through here, one of the main things that comes through is that there are multiple entry points into the practice. And not to think that there's just a single thing or a single practice. We can reflect on these qualities on almost anything and any different aspect. And so, the impulses, our reflexes, the way our mind works around certain stimuli, we can work with that. We can work with the fact that we get caught out by ignorance. We can get caught out by simply by the way our mind gets stuck on a particular projection of how things are. In fact, any of our experiences in our daily life give us the opportunity to reconnect with this sense of balance and understanding. And so, just like Bhante Vimransi was teaching about the importance of tension, we can think of the importance of resistance in our daily life. Wherever we feel a sense of resistance, there's something for us to learn and understand. And so we can so often feel that these things get in the way of our life or in the way of our practice. But actually, there are signposts. They're showing us that at that particular moment, there's something we didn't understand. And that we can look at it in a different way. We can use this. So I find that a very helpful perspective, because resistance in our lives is going to be present in almost every aspect of our lives at some time or another. And if we can find value and purpose behind that resistance, then it moves from being an obstruction and something that's causing us difficulty and restriction to something that can show us the way out. So I think this is helpful in daily lives. And Chaya, how are you? Oh, we would love to hear you. You're still on mute. We can't hear you. Can you come off mute? Yes.
Hi.
Yes. Hello, very nice to hear you.
So I will have to listen to this again. It was really deep, and I had to be really, really attentive to get the, I have got the gist of it a little bit, and once I listen to it once more, I think it'll be more clear. But
Okay.
yes, the movement of the mind is where we have to pay our attention to, and resistance is what I picked up well. So yeah, I will listen to you once more. Sure. Thank you so
All
much.
right.
And so nice
Okay.
to see you.
So good to see you too. So unless anyone's had something else they'd like to say, then we can finish with a closing prayer.
Did
Okay.
I,
Yes,
did
Paul.
I ask how you are? Last time you seemed quite ill.
Yes, yes. No, I've much recovered. So I feel very good at the moment. And yes, Piku.
I wanted to say belated happy birthday.
Oh, thank you. Yes, that was a few days ago. Yes. And
How was the celebration?
oh, it was very good. Yes, I had my close family around, and that was always a nice experience. And yes, it's a bit of a milestone. I was 65 a few days ago, and another milestone also for my mother, I should mention, who 2 days previously was 95. So that's an extraordinary age to live to. So thank you for asking, and yes, it was a very enjoyable time. So let's close with closing prayer. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit that we have thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, Devas and Nagas of mighty power, share this merit of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you very much for attending. All right. I look forward to the time we get to do this again. Okay. Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.